You're listening to Manx Radio, and I'm Judith Lay, welcoming you to the podcast of the Manx Sky at Night with Howard Parkin.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
We have got so much to talk about that we're just going to have to fade that down as quickly as we can. Faster my Howard Parkin, and welcome.
Faster my Judith, it's great to be here again.
Well, you are most welcome, Howard, and once again, a packed agenda.
Oh, always, Judith. There's so much to talk about. There's so much going on up there. I can't keep pace with it myself.
Well, that's saying something. A game of two halves, as we usually do. First half of the programme, let's have a look at the Manx skies, what you particularly enjoyed and what we can look forward to. And then we'll go out into space with a nice little bit of Glastonbury kind of related, sort of festival-related music in the middle of it all. Now, I'm not going to mention the fact that I was looking at a beautiful sky the other night and saw the moon and something very bright next to it, and I couldn't work out.
Well spotted, Judith.
I couldn't work out.
Oh, you must have done. Judith, go to the back of the class.
I know.
It was Venus. You could get it.
It was Thursday night, and I stopped and stood and looked at it.
Yeah, it was Venus. And not far from it, up and a little bit to the left, but much, much fainter, was the planet Mars. We actually had Jupiter and Mars in conjunction. We should have had Venus and Mars by Wings tonight, but we're not. We're having this other song. But yes, Venus, quite unmistakable. Actually not at its brightest yet. It doesn't get to its brightest until the 9th of July. When it's at the absolute brightest. What happens is because because Venus is moving between the Earth and the Sun, as it gets closer to the Earth, we get what we call the crescent phase, just like a crescent moon. Venus gets bigger and bigger, and the crescent phase of Venus is much bigger than any other phase, when you see more of the size of Venus, and it's a crescent, and it's what we call minus 4.5 magnitude, which is as bright as anything else in the sky other than the moon and the sun. Really spectacular, so look out for it. We've had glorious weather just recently, and hopefully it's going to continue. And I know we get some showers and everything else, but even tonight it's nice. Venus will be clearly visible tonight, but on the 9th of July it'll be absolutely like a beacon, like a spotlight looking at us. And then by the end of August it will disappear between the Earth and the Sun, and then re-emerge in the morning sky, where it'll be right through till over the new year. And then we'll start again in the evening sky middle of next year.
Well, that's the thing about Venus. It is around for a long time.
Oh, yes.
But so interesting that it goes from the night sky to the morning sky.
It does. Well, years ago, they used to think that Venus was two different planets. They used to think one planet was called Apollo, the other was called There was Apollo and Hesperus and Mercury and Venus, the two planets on the inner solar system. And they thought there were four separate planets. But then some bright guy in ancient Greek times realised that, in fact, they were the same object being seen in the morning and the evening. And they worked out they were swapping places each side of the sun. And that's how they became known as they are now, Mercury and Venus. Now, Mercury is much closer to the sun, therefore much smaller, much fainter. But we've actually got an opportunity to see Mercury this month. I'm just checking my data here. The actual time to see it is going to be on the 19th of July, when Mercury will be alongside Venus. You're going to have a wonderful opportunity. We're going to have Venus in the sky, the crescent moon above it. Just as we saw it below the moon a few days ago, it'll be directly below the moon on the 19th of July. And to the right of it, much fainter, you probably need a pair of binoculars to see it, you'll see the much fainter planet Mercury. And this is the best chance of the year to see the planet Mercury in our Manx night sky in the west over Peel, as I say, on the 19th of July.
Well, you must be feeling a little bit more positive, because minute by minute we're getting a little bit more darkness, aren't we?
We are indeed. In fact, since the solstice, which was on Tuesday, the 21st of June, we've gained a minute, or lost a minute, any which way you look at it. And the sun, of course, is going down that little bit later. And the sun is, of course, rising that much earlier as well, so it's slowly getting there. And I just looked it up out of interest. On the 21st of June we had 17 hours and 10 minutes of daylight. By the time we get to the next show we're going to be doing on the 29th of July, daylight will be 15 hours and 50 minutes long. So it's slowly but sure. It does take a little while to notice the effect. I mean, we don't notice 1 minute in 5 days is nothing. But slowly but surely the nights are drawing in, and we astronomers love that because, of course, we get longer night skies, we get time to see more objects in the sky, and this horrible, no, I won't say horrible, but this time of the day, the time of the year when it's broad daylight right through till about 1 o'clock in the morning, then we get half an hour of darkness, and then it's back, the sun comes up again.
I know, it's lovely, isn't it?
It is, actually. I must confess, I do like it myself. But I think I've mentioned this to you before. We use a term called astronomical twilight, and astronomical twilight does not end until the 3rd of August. And astronomical twilight is defined as when the sun is not more than 15% below the horizon. And it doesn't dip below. So even if you're living in the west of the island and you look to the northern hemisphere, you'll see the light sky there as the sun is that much further below the horizon.
Yeah, but there's no doubt about it. I think that the extra daylight, the longer days, lighter nights, they're good for us, aren't they? And generally,
yes.
as human beings, they're good for us, aren't they?
Yes. I don't like going to bed when it's still light, though. But there's one thing I do object to. I don't mind waking up so much at 4 o'clock in the morning when it's light, but there's just something
very wrong.
You got to go to bed when it's dark. I've always said when I've been on a cruise up in the Arctic Circle once years ago, and we went to I think I said this last month, or maybe someone else I told it to. We were in the nightclub on board the ship, and it was pitch black, and we were boogieing the night away, and we were dancing away, and everything else. And it was pitch black, and the lasers were going. And at 12:30, we walked out to go back down to our cabin. We walked out into the sunlight, broad daylight. It was just so odd.
That is strange.
That was very odd. But,
we just got a little glimpse into the other life of Mr. and Mrs. Parkin. Right, come on, let's go back to the sky. What else is the big news? Noctilucent clouds.
Yes, noctilucent clouds were seen for the first time about a week ago. My friend of mine in Edinburgh, he said he saw something, actually showed me the photograph, and he saw this beautiful ethereal bluey, silvery blue colour of electric blue, I think is the colour of these noctilucent clouds. Now these clouds are about 80 kilometres up, very, very high up in the sky, and they're exactly what it says on the tin. They're sky. The word noctilucent is the Latin word for night shining, and what's happening, these clouds are very, very high up, and of course they're catching the rays of the sun, which isn't that far below the horizon. So if you look towards the western horizon around midnight time, and you see these strange light clouds, which are definitely silvery blue in colour, once seen, never forgotten. They are absolutely beautiful. And there's all sorts of theories as to what causes them. And one of the theories is they form on meteoric dust. And meteoric dust from entering meteors into the Earth's atmosphere, just like snowflakes form on a grain of something. So these clouds form on these grains of meteoric dust. And there's also evidence that there's more noctilucent clouds as the Earth's climate is changing, warming, for however means and everything else that is, and the noctilucent clouds are used as a monitor for that, and they're fascinating to see, and I recommend anybody, if you can't sleep one night and you're looking west around midnight, 1 o'clock, just see if you can see these clouds. We've had some wonderful clear nights recently, and hopefully you might get to see them as well. Venus will be long gone by then, of course. Venus is setting about 11 o'clock now. In fact, Venus actually, just a few weeks ago, was actually setting after midnight. So technically speaking, the evening star became a morning star, which is all very confusing.
Yep,
so we won't dwell on that one.
That's very technical. But, you're talking about the noctilucent clouds, and isn't it good that there are still areas that are not sure. They might be caused by this, but they might be caused by that. Isn't it good that there is still uncertainty?
Well, that's it. The inquisitive mind, it's a human nature to be inquisitive and to ask questions all the time. And as fast as we think we've got an answer to something, there's more questions behind it. And it's the case in any walk of life, really, whether it be in medicine, biology, oceanography, you name it, astronomy to name but a few. And that's human nature, and we just want to know why. It's what we have the ability to do. It's often said that we are very tiny. In the scale of the universe, we're very tiny. Yes, we are very tiny. But aren't we big in that we are able to work out these things that make these things happen?
Yeah.
And that's the human mind.
But I think the perspective is put on it when you said, just in the run of conversation there, the ancient Greeks thought they were 2 different planets or 4 different planets, and they didn't have all the sophisticated equipment that we've got. What do we talk about? The James Webb Telescope, which we haven't actually mentioned for a while.
No,
possibly might be on the agenda.
I need to talk about that again.
And that's just the thing. When that first was opened up in space and started to work, it was the top topic. Everybody was talking about it. We were looking for images. And then it almost becomes, I'm not saying a commonplace, but it slips into the vocabulary of space doesn't it? And yet something that could come from that would change our thinking completely.
Well, there is. I mean, just talking about that, the James Webb Telescope, maybe the popular media don't publicise what they're showing, but just a few weeks ago, they took a photograph of the moon Enceladus round Saturn, and it shows an ice plume erupting. Absolutely huge ice plume erupting from the surface of Enceladus. Now, Enceladus is a moon that's covered in ice, and the ice has fissures in it, and those fissures open and they erupt like volcanoes, and this plume of water spread out, huge massive plume of water that was even spotted by the James Webb Telescope all these millions of miles away. Incredible photograph, and it just shows that we know the geological features on Enceladus caused this to happen, but we didn't expect to see that from the James Webb. And what's happening with the James Webb, to answer your question, is that what they're doing now is they're doing lots and lots of images, consolidating lots sort of surveys and everything else. And I suspect there was a big release, news release last July. I don't know if it's going to be this July, but they every now and then they issue a batch of photographs, and some of them are just breathtaking. And I really look forward to seeing more and more breathtaking pictures from the James Webb and indeed from the Hubble as well.
Yeah, and the Hubble still
going strong,
still
working strong, and they're actually working in harmony. They're looking at some things together at the moment, I understand, and that even gives us more exciting things to look forward to. Pictures of ancient galaxies that formed literally at the time of the birth of the universe. If you take the birth of the universe into a year, say the universe starts on the 1st of January, now the 31st of December, these are galaxies that formed about the 2nd and 3rd of January in that year. To put it into perspective, I can talk about millions of years, but if you put it into perspective of a year, you get some feel for how far back we're able to look in space now and work out the way these galaxies originated and the way that we can analyse them and look at them through the fantastic instruments we've got on the Earth and, of course, up in space.
The contrast that it seems to highlight now is that we look at the sky and we see the stars, the planets, the moon, and it's beautiful, it's peaceful, it makes us feel rested and at peace. It's very good for it. But in actual fact, listening to what you're saying about this ice plume that they've just seen, what actually, there's probably so much going on, exploding and imploding and changing and all the rest of it, that it isn't peaceful at all out in space, is it?
I mean, we've just had a supernova erupt in one of the galaxies, M101, I think it is. There's a bright new star in that galaxy. You need a telescope to see it, but that is a supernova star in a neighbouring galaxy of ours that can be seen through our telescopes and everything else on the Earth. And one of these days, and it's not going to cause any problem for it, but one of these days we're going to get a supernova erupt in our own Milky Way galaxy. And that star will be brighter than Venus, I mentioned a few minutes ago. And astronomers are always looking for this to happen. And we haven't had one since 1672, when Tycho Brahe saw it, way back in ancient times, when we still thought the Earth went round the sun went round the Earth rather than the other way around. And that was 1672, and we reckon we get a supernova roughly every 500 years. So we're not far off our 500, so keep your eyes watched. And as you say, there's lots going on up there. It's just a question of knowing what to look at and when.
Well, yeah, and quite. But it is, I do think it's fascinating for us to look at something so peaceful and know that actually what's going on behind the scenes is anything but peaceful. It's evolving.
It's so big, of course. That's the other thing. It's so massive, and time and space are just so massive and a different scale to our human lives, for instance. So it does put it in perspective for us.
Indeed. Right. What else in the coming weeks, Howard?
Well, I need to mention, I don't like mentioning, but I will because it makes people look at it. On the 3rd of July, we have the first supermoon of the year. And us astronomers hate the word supermoon because it's just slightly bigger than it normally is. But it became into fashion about 10 years ago, so we might as well tell people. But the reason for that is the Earth is at its furthest from the Sun this year on the 6th of July. So that means the Moon will appear to be slightly bigger because the Earth is further away from the Sun, and therefore the Moon will appear slightly bigger, and we have our first supermoon. There's one of 4 this year, and all it means is the Moon will appear to be ever so slightly bigger. But I defy anybody to measure the distance. It's a fraction. It's about 14% bigger compared to when it's at its smallest. And of course, we use the other name. The wimpy moon is when the moon is at its smallest when looking from it, at the Earth from it, when it's at its smallest.
Well, I think in consideration of your blood pressure and the fact that you don't like talking about wimpy moons and supermoons, I think I need to play you some soothing music.
I think so, Judith. That would be a good idea.
Have you ever been to a rock festival, Howard?
No.
Enjoy the music.
Thank you.
Child of God, he was walking along the road.
Back to 1970 in the company of Matthew's Southern Comfort, and Woodstock and Howard Parkin, who is presenting the Manx Sky at Night for us, chose that because of the line, "We are stardust."
A wonderful concept. I mean, I could talk about that in its own right, but yes, we are made of the stuff of stars, and maybe that's something we'll cover in another talk. But,
a very romantic idea.
It is a wonderful idea that we're made of the stuff of stars.
Let's talk about dark skies. Megan Eves, dark sky advocate. Tell me about her,
That's
Howard.
right. Well, I was delighted to get a phone call and an email from this lady a few weeks ago because she was coming to the island. She's the Dark Skies ambassador for London. I'm the Dark Skies ambassador for the Isle of Man, and she's a journalist, and she was commissioned by the Isle of Man government, Visit Isle of Man, to come over and investigate and talk about the Isle of Man dark skies. So she got in touch with me, and we had a wonderful time because it was wonderful weather. And yes, it wasn't dark. We didn't get to see much. We did get to see Venus from the Faulty Will, the reservoir car park. Beautiful evening, and there was Venus. And she's doing an article on the dark skies of the British Isles, and she's fascinated by the Isle of Man because she's realised we've got 26 dark sky discovery sites, and she wants to know why, how and when did they come into existence. So I was able to tell her all about that, and we took her around the island, told her all sorts of things, and she's gone away now to write an article about it. And she is, as I say, she's an advocate, and they've changed the name actually. It's not the International Dark Skies Association anymore, it's the Dark Skies Association. And there's all sorts of things going on with them. There's dark sky sanctuaries, dark sky centres springing up all over the world. And she asked the direct question, has the Isle of Man considered being a dark sky sanctuary or place? And I said, yes, it has been considered, but it's currently not happening. But hopefully her article may have something to do with that and make people more aware of what we've got in the Isle of Man and indeed appreciate them more.
Well, I think that I know that it's a topic that we've touched on before, and I know it's very, very close to your heart. You feel very passionately about this, quite rightly. But I don't think it's something that's going to be sorted out quickly. But that's not to say it won't be sorted out. It may take a little while.
It will evolve. I mean,
it will evolve.
More and more
yes.
interested in astronomy. I've seen that in my own what I do, and people are getting more and more interested in astronomy. It's one of these natural subjects. It's one of these things that you can look up at the sky. It completely removes you from your day-to-day existence. As you said before, looking up at the night sky and how wonderful it is. You don't need to know what you're looking at. Just marvel at it and wonder at it. Seeing Venus, the bright object in the sky, what is it? Just makes people look and wonder. And that's what it's about. And it's drip feeding, but at the same time it's growing slowly, and long may it continue.
Yeah, and I think with some things like this you just have to keep on gently pushing the agenda forward.
Away.
But I do think there's an irony in the advocate for London dark skies. Do they ever have a dark sky in London?
No, that's why she was so fascinated.
Ever.
I mean, she was looking at she can't see the Milky Way from here. She's seen it from other places. And she said, you never see the Milky Way. This, incidentally, is a time of the year to see what we call the rich star clouds of the constellations of Sagittarius, the middle, the deepest, the most prolific part of the Milky Way, low on the southern horizon, the constellation Sagittarius and Capricorn. They are only seen this time of the year. So as it starts to get darker and darker, if we get to mid-August, and we'll talk about this next month, you're going to see far more of the Milky Way. Just spare a thought for people living in London, Manchester, wherever. They don't see the Milky Way ever. I was on a cruise a few weeks ago, and somebody actually came up to me. I was actually saddened by this. This guy said to me, are you going to take us stargazing? Oh, yes. Will we see the Milky Way? I said, I sincerely hope so, because we're on a ship, it's dark and everything else. He says, I've never seen the Milky Way. I've heard about it, and I've never seen it. I thought, how sad is that? One of the most magnificent sights we see in the night sky, the Milky Way, and I've never seen it at all.
But this is, if you happen to live somewhere that's got really serious light pollution,
absolutely.
You won't see these things,
You'll
even
never
on the
see
best
it,
night.
And we don't see it when the moon's around. The moon is the biggest source of light pollution there is. But every other week, or every 2 weeks in each month, when there's no moon around, we get to see the Milky Way in all its spectacular glory. And this time of the year, look due south, late July, mid-August, and we'll talk about that next month. That's the best time to see the Milky Way, which incidentally is seen much better in the southern hemisphere. If you go to Australia and New Zealand and places like Melbourne and Wellington and places like that, they see the southern Milky Way much better because that's the centre of the galaxy rather than the periphery or the outside bits which we're seeing from the northern hemisphere.
Before we get beaten by the clock, as we do every month, Howard, space, what is there in space that we should be watching out for, thinking about or following?
Well, we've got Steve Bowen, one of the astronauts on board the International Space Station at the moment, who actually came to the Isle of Man in 2012. He was one of the crew with Nicole Stott, and he's actually the commander of the International Space Station at the moment. I've been in touch with him. He's a lovely bloke, very chatty, very pleasant, and he's currently, as I say, going over every is it 6 times a day, 12 times a day? I can't remember the figures now. And I'm hoping he's going to get some pictures of the Isle of Man. But he has just equalled the record of the most spacewalks by an American astronaut. He just completed his 8th spacewalk. So congratulations to Steve. I think he'll be listening, but you never know. And hopefully he might get to do another one before he comes down in a few months' time, and they'll have broken the record and become the most prolific spacewalker we've ever had.
But listen to that, spacewalking. You know, a few years ago,
the idea of it
would have been,
the very
walking.
idea of walking in space is just, of course, they've got important jobs to do up there. They had to fix new solar panels on the International Space Station. That's what they're doing. And yes, the training, the equipment, the precautions. There's always 2 of them do it. They always have a buddy system for obvious reasons. And it's amazing to think 8 times. It's a lot.
It is.
I'd be happy with 1.
Well, I'm not giving up my crusade to get you into space, but only if
It's
we
a bit
can be
like
sure.
Chris Williams' Spitfire Fund, I think.
No. I think there's more chance of you going into space than there is of Chris getting his Spitfire, unfortunately.
I hope so.
We just have to make sure that we can get you back before we let you go.
Yes, please.
Right, anything else?
Yeah, I'd just like to mention, I was delighted to see, I subscribe to a magazine. I'm in a society called the Society for Popular Astronomy, and I was delighted to read in it the other day, the July-August edition, the Isle of Man Astronomical Society has named its observatory after the Society's late founder, James Martin. James helped form the Society in 1989 and later helped set up the observatory at Boxdale. Members gather at the observatory for alternating meetings and social evenings. And I didn't expect that. I did send a press release out way back in February when James sadly passed away, and it was lovely to see that in print in one of the national magazines. And it's a tribute
That's
to James.
great.
And we are going to have a ceremony very shortly to rename the observatory, so it's going to be known forever. Instead of the IOM-ASO, which is what it is now, it's going to be known as the JMO, the James Martin Observatory.
Which is very, very fitting and very
Couldn't
nice.
say more.
But whilst it's lovely for us to do that on the island, and we understand how important it is, as you say, it is good to see that getting into the national press. Probably a bit too early to be talking about events that the Society will be running later in the year.
Yes, but we just took a decision that we're going to have some more open nights. They've been very popular indeed. We're going to have a couple of open nights this winter. The first of those will be at the end of October. Please don't inundate us with messages or information about that. It'll be towards the end of October, and it'll be fully advertised on Eventbrite like we've done previously. And we're almost definitely going to be doing another one probably in January, February time. The dates haven't been decided yet, and we're going to be advertising them much near the time. They do get sold out very quickly, so if you're interested, just keep your eyes and ears open on the website and the Eventbrite website, and of course tune in to us next month, and maybe I'll have some more information then for you.
But the fact that they do get booked up so quickly says a lot about the quality of them and
Yes, indeed.
and the popularity,
And it
which
doesn't
is
have
excellent.
to be a clear night. I mean, the one thing we all appreciate, and I was saying this to Megan the other day, even on a cloudy night, we've got places we can go. We can go and do talks at the observatory, go to lectures, whatever. And then, of course, the big bonus, if we get a clear night, then we've, of course, got the pleasures of looking at the night sky through our telescope.
Going stargazing. Right, in the last 30 seconds, Starship maybe launching next month?
Yeah, I mean,
No?
I'm glad you
Yes?
mentioned that, because there's a real taste of that, because Starship launched a few weeks ago in April and blew up 4 minutes into flight, but that was a success. That rocket, the biggest rocket ever built, was a huge success. It got off the pad, it basically did its job of launching. The first stage almost depleted all its fuel. There were a few problems, but they learnt so much from it. And the one thing it did do, which was not expected, is it practically destroyed the launch pad when it launched. So powerful was the rocket. And if you watch the launch of it, instead of being clouds of white water vapour, there's lots of dust and also methane, which is the fuel, and it completely destroyed the launch pad, which is now being rebuilt. And Elon Musk was stating that they hope to relaunch it as early as the 19th of July. So watch this space. If this one gets into orbit, I mean, this is what Elon Musk does. He doesn't give up because he has a problem. Everyone said it was a huge failure, it blew up. It wasn't a huge failure. It was 99% successful. It was just slight problems at the end that caused oscillation, which meant it had to be destroyed. It undertook what they call an RDU, a rapid unscheduled disassembly.
Do you know, whilst you were talking, I was desperately trying to remember what it is. There's no such thing as a failure in space, is
a
there?
rapid unscheduled disassembly.
Rapid unscheduled disassembly. Remember
It
that.
blew up.
It applies. You can apply that to anything. Howard, we've been beaten by the clock. It is, as always, a pleasure to talk to you. So go away, get some more fascinating facts for us, and come back and talk to us again on the final Sunday of the month of July. Howard Parkin, thank you very much indeed for this month's Manx Sky at Night.
Thank you, Judith.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.